Hello students, I am Raghavan Kumar Singh, faculty of US Academy and Institute. Today we will discuss class 9th history's 4th chapter, Forest Society and Colonialism. Forest society and colonialism takes about the growth of industries and urban centers, ships and railways, new demands on the forest for timbers and other forest products. In this chapter, we will discuss about the new rules of forest use, new ways of organizing the forest, the colonial control, how forest areas are mapped, trees are classified, and plantations were developed. Forests give us a mixture of things to satisfy our different needs, such as fuel, fodder, leaves, trees, suitable for building ships or railways, trees that can provide hardwood. Forest products like roots, fruits, tubers, herbs are used for medicinal purpose. Wood for agriculture implement like yokes, plough, etc. Forest also provide shelter to animals and birds. They also add moisture to the atmosphere. Rainfall is trapped in forest lands. Foresters and villagers had very different ideas of what a good forest should look like. The forest department wanted trees were suitable for building ships or railways. They needed trees that would provide hardwood and were tall and straight. So, particular species like teak and sal were promoted and others were cut. The new forest laws meant severe hardship for the villagers across the country. After the act, which was called as the Forest Act, all their everyday practices, cutting wood for their houses, grazing their cattle, collecting fruits and roots, hunting and fishing became illegal. Peoples were now forced to steal wood from the forest, and if they were caught, they were at the mercy of the forest guard who would take bribes from them. Women who collected fuel wood were especially worried. It was also common for police, constables, and forest guards to harass peoples by demanding free food from them. Deforestation is cutting down of trees indiscriminately in forest areas. Under colonial rule, it became very systematic and extensive. Now, why deforestation? As the population increases over the centuries and the demand for food went up, peasants extended the boundaries of cultivation by clearing forests. The British encourages the production of commercial crops like jute, sugar, wheat, and cotton for their industries as raw material. The British thought that forests were unproductive lands as they yielded no revenue, nor agriculture produce. Cultivation was viewed as a sign of progress. Now, land to be improved. Over the centuries, as the population grew up and the demand for food went up, peasants started clearing forests and breaking new lands. British encouraged the production of commercial crops like jute, sugar, wheat, and cotton. In the 19th century, demand for these crops increased. The colonial state thought that forests were unproductive. Oak forests in England were disappearing. There was no timber supply for the shipbuilding industries. Forest resources of Indian were used to make ships for the Royal Navy. The spread of railways required two things: land to be cleared to lay railway tracks, wood as fuel for locomotives and for railways line sleepers. Large areas of natural forest were cleared for tea, coffee, and rubber plantation. Thus, the land was given to planters at cheap rates. The rise of commercial forestry. British were worried that reckless use of trees by traders and use of forest by local peoples would destroy forest. Dietrich Brandes, a German expert, became the first inspector general of forest in India. He realized that a proper system had to be introduced to manage the forest, and peoples need to be trained in the science of conservation. But it needed legal sanction in 1864. Indian Forest Service was set up in Dehradun in 1906. In scientific forestry, natural forest, which had lots of different types of trees, were cut down. In 1906, the Forest Act was enacted, which was amended twice, once in 1878 and then in 1927. The Act of 1878 divided forests into three categories: reserved, protected, and village forest. The best forests were called reserve forest. Now, how were the lives of peoples affected? Villagers wanted forest with a species of different types to satisfy their needs of fuel, fodder, and leaves. On the other hand, the forest department wanted trees like teak and sal, suitable for building ships or railways. Roots, leaves, and fruits and tubers were used for many things. In the forest, almost everything was available, such as herbs, logs, plough, bamboo, etc. From the fruits of maua tree, oil was extracted for the purpose of cooking and lighting lamp. The Forest Act meant severe hardship for villagers across the country. Peoples were forced to steal wood from the forest. Forest guard used to take bribes of if they got caught. Police constable and forest guard harassed people by demanding free food from them. Now, how did forest rule affect the cultivation? Practices of shifting cultivation or Sweden cultivation was introduced during European colonialism or Sweden agriculture. It is a traditional agriculture practiced in many parts of Asia, Africa, and South America. In shifting cultivation, parts of the forest are cut and burnt in rotation. After the first monsoon rain, seeds are sown in the ashes and the crops is harvested by October to November. For a couple of years, such plots are cultivated and then left for 12 to 18 years. On these plots, a mixture of crops is grown. According to European foresters, this practice is harmful for the forest. This type of cultivation also made it difficult for the government to calculate taxes. So the government decided to ban shifting cultivation. Now, who could hunt? Peoples who lived near forests survived by hunting deer, partridge, and a variety of small animals. The practice was prohibited by the forest law, and those who were caught hunting were punished for poaching. In India, hunting of tiger and other animals is a part of the culture of the court and nobility for centuries. The scale of hunting increased under colonial rule to such an extent that various species became almost extinct. Rewards were given for killing wild animals. Some areas of forest were reserved for hunting only. Now, new trades, new employment, and new services. New opportunities open up in trade in India. Forest trade was not new. It existed from medieval period where Adivasi communities used to trade elephant and other goods like hides, horns, silk cocoon, ivory, bamboo, spices, fiber, grasses, gums, and resins through nomadic communities like the Banjaras. But trade was completely regulated by the government, which gave many large European trading firms to sole right to trade in the forest product of particular areas. New opportunities of work did not improve the well-being of the peoples. Now, rebellion in the forest. Forest communities rebelled against the changes that were being imposed on them. Some of the leaders of these movements are the Sidhu and Kanu in the Santhal Parganas, Birsa Munda of Chota Nagpur, or Aluri Sitarama Raju of Andhra Pradesh. The people of Bastar. Bastar is located in the southernmost part of the Chhattisgarh and bordered Andhra Pradesh, Odisha and Maharashtra. The Bastar central part is on a plateau, and to the north is the Chhattisgarh plain, and to its south is a Godavari plain. Different communities live in Bastar, such as Maria, Muria, Gond, Dhurwas, Batras, and Halbas. The peoples of Bastar believed that each village was given its land by the earth, and in return, they look after the earth by making some offerings at each agriculture festival. Local villagers look after all the natural resources within their boundaries, and peoples pay a small fee called Devsari, dand, or man in exchange, if they want to take some wood from the forest of another villages. Now the fear of the peoples. In 1905, colonial government proposed to reserve two-thirds of the forest in and stop shifting cultivation, hunting and collecting of forest produce. Some peoples used to stay in forest by working free from the forest department, and these are called forest villagers. Villagers for a long run suffered from increased land rent and frequent demand of labors and goods. People started discussing these issues in these villages, their villages council, bazaar, and at festivals. Dhurwas of the Kangar forest took initiative where a reservation first took place. Bazaars were looted, the houses of officials and traders, schools and police stations were burnt and robbed, and grains redistributed. British troops were sent to suppress the rebellion. After independence, the same practice of keeping peoples out of the forest and reserving them for industrial use continued. Now, the forest transformation in Java. Java is famous as a rice producing island in Indonesia, but There was a time when it was covered mostly with the forest. In Java, the Dutch started forest management. Villages existed in the fertile plains, and there were only many communities living in the mountain and practicing shifting cultivation. The woodcutters of Java. The Kalangs of Java were skilled forest cutters and shifting cultivators. They are expert in harvesting teak and for the kings to build their palaces. When the Dutch began to gain control over the forest in the 18th century, they tried to make the Kalangs work under them. In 1770, the Kalangs resisted by attacking a Dutch fort at Joanna, but the uprising was suppressed. Now, Dutch scientific forestry. In the 19th century, Dutch enacted forest law in Java, restricting villages' access to forest. Wood could only be cut for making river boats or constructing houses. Villagers were punished for grazing cattle, transporting wood without a permit, or traveling or forest roads with horse carts or cattle. Firstly, the Dutch imposed rent on lands being cultivated in the forest and then exempt some villages from these rents if they worked collectively to provide free labor and buffaloes for cutting and transporting timbers. This was known as the Blunden-Deensten system. Now, the Samians challenge. Surintiko, Samin of Randabla Tang village, a teak forest village, questioned the state ownership of the forest and argued that the state had not created the wind, water, earth, and wood, so it could not own it. Soon, a widespread movement developed. Some of the Saminists protested by lying down on their lands when the Dutch came to survey it, while others refused to pay taxes or fines or perform labor. Now, war and deforestation. The First World War and the Second World War had a major impact on forest. In Java, the Dutch followed a scorched earth policy, destroying sawmills and burning huge piles of giant teak logs. After the war, it was difficult for the Indonesian Forest Service to get this land back. New development in forestry. Conservation of forest has become a more important goal. In many places across India, from Mizoram to Kerala, dense forests have survived only because villages protected them in sacred groves known as sarnas, Devara, Kudu, Kan, and Rai, etc.